coming up on this episode of the Roundtable. The key distinction is actually not like, are people making slip-ups, but what gets revealed when the slip-ups are made. Because everybody's comparing this to the Butter emails, to the Hillary scandal, and like, oh, these conservatives, they made such a big deal out of being irresponsible with top secret information, like when Hillary Clinton did it, and now they're just doing the same thing. But the point of that, or the point of the Burisma scandal and all of these other things on the left, was not like that there were slip-ups being made. It was like what was behind the curtain of secrecy turned out to be really corrupt and anti-American, and like we had all these problems about the things that were actually coming to light. So yeah, the fact that we got a little peek into a part of the Trump administration that we shouldn't have, and it basically turns out that they're talking about what they say they're talking about, bombing the Houthis, retaining American supremacy. That part of it is a little bit encouraging.
Welcome, everyone, once again to the Roundtable, the editors and publishers podcast at the American Mind and the Claremont Institute. I'm your host for this episode, Ryan Williams, president of the Claremont Institute and publisher of the Claremont Review books. I'm joined by sometimes every other week participant Seth Barron, White Lotus editor Spencer Klavan.
It's like too many criticisms.
Yeah.
The peanut gallery for the White Lotus.
Yeah, Thai pop critic Spencer Klavan.
5 stars, all 5 stars down the line for the Thai pop.
Also, associate editor of the Claremont Review books, and Mike Sabo, managing editor of the American Mind. Well, we thought, what else are we going to start today with but Signalgate? For anyone living under a rock, it appeared over the weekend, or we got news over the weekend, that a high-level national security signal chat with J.D. Vance, Ratcliffe, the head of the CIA, Mike Waltz, and Pete Hegseth, and others accidentally, it appears to be probably Mike Waltz or one of his staffers, accidentally added the wrong JG. I don't know who they were trying to add, but they accidentally added Jeff Goldberg of The Atlantic, and he reported on some of the things he saw. He was holding back some of the more sensitive information, and the way the team was CYAing, I guess, goaded him to release even the sensitive stuff because it's now passed. But they were discussing what the policy should be about the Houthis, and basically discussing some operational details, at least Hegseth was, about the soon-to-occur strikes on the Houthis and Houthi leadership. That was the sensitive information that's now all out in the public realm. Trump has said that Waltz is fine, but it appears to me that he is still skating on pretty thin ice. He went on Laura Ingram's show, I think last night maybe, and did not cover himself in glory. She was pressing him a bit, and he seemed to, his default mode was prevarication and obfuscation more than clarity or good talking points. The messaging around this in general from all of them is a little slipshod, it seems to me, with Trump saying one thing, Hegseth kind of lying about it out of the gate. We'll see. They insist that it was not Alex Wong, Deputy National Security Advisor, and Waltz seems to think that it somehow just happened, out of the blue. We're not quite sure. He said we're going to get Elon Musk on it. The whole thing is kind of a disaster. I don't know if it's going to have much legs more than a week. We'll see. Our news cycle these days is pretty frenetic, to say the least, but they're circling the wagons, and I don't know. It just shows at the very least some incompetence on Waltz's part, or his staff, or both. I don't know. What do you guys make of all this?
Well, the top line item and the thing that makes it so hooky is that it's hilarious, and it sort of activates dread and fears that we all live with daily in the internet age, or at least we've all had. We might even have had this happen, like you accidentally reply all on your scathing mockery of some guy's poem that they sent to a group chat or whatever. So that part of it just, I think, is really capturing people's imaginations. And it's one of those moments when your illusion that there's some barrier beyond which people are hyper competent and kind of living in some other space is just shattered. Like everybody is just kind of a dude bumbling along. We're all using the same apps down to the, down to the signal level. We're all kind of struggling with the same stuff. So I think that part of it has just given it more news legs, and the fact that it plays right into the major criticism of Trump 2.0, which is that it's shoddy and sloppy and kind of all over the place, and nobody quite knows what anybody's doing. And so that part of it is not great. And generally, I think they should, because they're trying so many different things and because they're taking such a spaghetti at the wall approach to some of these like big problems, taking big risks, making bold choices. Like I think all of that is good, but I think when you do that, you also have to really button up, I guess what they call your OPSEC, or like just the logistics of the actual stuff that you're doing. And I do worry about that. But I also have genuine questions, and I don't, like many people, I have not overnight become an expert in comms security. But unlike many people, I'm not going to pretend to have. And I genuinely don't know, like, are there better options than Signal for like nimble communications between heads of state about bombing the Houthis? I assume there are, but also one of the features of the internet world that makes it so nerve-wracking for all of us is that kind of anything can get accidentally hacked, a slip of a finger, like for want of a nail, the shoe was lost. For want of a shoe, the horse was lost. For want of a horse, the soldier, the army, the kingdom. Like, so I'm kind of interested in that aspect of it, actually. It seems like a very 21st century problem that reactivates this like ancient issue of like the little minor details of statesmanship. And it does seem, Ryan, like these guys are caught a bit with their pants down, and like this is not just something that has a good explanation. Like this was a genuine error. So the thing about it that will stick with me is like, what exactly is the solution to this problem? But no, I don't think it's going to be like a news story next week. Exactly.
I think the solution's easy, right? Don't add Jeff Goldberg to your
Don't put Jeff Goldberg to any group chat.
Yeah, I mean, it seems kind of, I mean, it's a mistake. It was an error. I mean, it's not like doesn't show that anybody was really compromised. It's not a question of, somebody intentionally leaking things. Hegseth wasn't caught involved with like, oh, why were all of your messages going to this Chinese spy?
Yeah.
I mean, it just doesn't, it seems like the sort of thing, yeah, it's going to be very like Washington. All the people involved in the news and politics of Washington and all of that will be kind of into it for a few days, but it just doesn't seem that significant, really. I mean, I think it's a good wake up call for them to keep things squared away, tighten up ship. But
yeah, I suspect the public doesn't really care all that much. If the Russians had scooped it up and notified the Iranians and the Houthis and something got screwed up, that would be a much, much worse problem, obviously. And totally. Somebody, I think, would have to resign, or maybe multiple people even. That would have put Hegseth really in the hot seat, of course. But I think, I think the collective public probably treats this with kind of a yawn and moves on. Whereas, if you guys listen to Politico yesterday morning or this morning on their morning update, it's all that Washington can talk about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like you said, it's just such a Washington insider thing. No one's going to care by the end of the week. Yeah, it does obviously not put some things in a great light that a guy like Jeff Goldberg, who lied about Trump, I mean, many, many, many times, Trump is a fascist, dictator, Hitler, et cetera, et cetera. So absolutely not the guy you want added. There's conflicting reports, obviously, you mentioned about, did he send an invite, and then did Alex Wong or whomever, Mike Waltz himself, did they accept? How exactly even did that happen? Was an invite sent out to him? I think it was supposed to be another JG. I think it was Jameson Greer, I think is his name, who is supposed to be maybe added to that. But then you actually do look at the messages, and Tulsi Gabbard's come out and said, nothing top secret, nothing confidential. Maybe some of the stuff was confidential at the time, but it no longer is, just because these things already happened. I don't know. You see kind of competence, and you see people who are basically in public exactly like they are in private. Like, I mean, JD Vance seemed exactly like JD Vance to me. So, I mean, you do see some competency, I think, in some of the ways that they're talking about things. It's very kind of straightforward. And then also, there's this idea, oh my gosh, they leaked battle plans and everything. It's like, no, this is just people talking. I mean, people who think that they actually leaked all that stuff, I think have never probably seen any of that before, ever. So they don't know what they're talking about. But, it's just one of these typical Washington scandals that I think is just really, at the end of the day, not going to amount to anything. And, if something like this has to happen, okay. I mean, again, just no big deal, move on to much more important things.
When they started raiding Mar-a-Lago for classified documents that Trump had supposedly stashed and warehoused for nefarious purposes, we did all kind of discover in the aftermath that oh, wait, Biden also has done this and in fact has dodderingly misplaced the nuclear codes in his garage because he forgot while he was out getting ice cream or something. And gradually it did emerge that there's kind of a lot of this that goes on. There's a lot of just oversight and human error, and especially at the top levels where it's just one individual flawed human being. There's a ton of looseness around the edges, probably more than we should feel comfortable with. And again, I keep coming back to when I was a kid, really young, in elementary school, I used to have this, I guess, sort of Freudian fantasy that at some point, somewhere around the 6th grade, a teacher would pull me aside into a back room and be like, you've reached a certain age or something, you've shown some sign of maturity. And now we're going to teach you all the secrets. We're going to tell you the things adults know, so that you will be competent. And it's and then I'll understand all of these inside jokes that people make, and I will grasp kind of how the workings. And at some point, I feel we all have the moment where we realize that's never going to happen. There is no secret knowledge boundary beyond which you gain some other level of competency. You gradually acquire expertise, you gradually learn things, but overall, you are always just vulnerable and flawed and flying by the seat of your pants. And I feel we all still live in that, Spencer's 4th grade fantasy. We all still live in that fantasy about the government, especially the US government, especially governments of major powers, that at a certain point you reach a certain level of elected officialdom and somebody takes you into the Masonic Lodge and inducts you into the mysteries of how to never make any mistakes ever. And one thing that I think the internet age has really revealed, because it's so porous and vulnerable to these sorts of things, is that's 100% not true. Also, most of the time, nobody is driving the car. And yes, this is very concerning, but it is, I think, what Seth said, that the key distinction is actually not are people making slip-ups, but what gets revealed when the slip-ups are made. Because everybody's comparing this to the Butter emails, to the Hillary scandal, and oh, these conservatives, they made such a big deal out of being irresponsible with top secret information, when Hillary Clinton did it, and now they're just doing the same thing. But the point of that, or the point of the Burisma scandal and all of these other things on the left, was not that there were slip-ups being made. It was what was behind the curtain of secrecy turned out to be really corrupt and anti-American, and we had all these problems about the things that were actually coming to light. So yeah, the fact that we got a little peek into a part of the Trump administration that we shouldn't have, and it basically turns out that they're talking about what they say they're talking about, bombing the Houthis, retaining American supremacy, that part of it is a little bit encouraging.
The funny thing about it is the realization by a lot of America, maybe especially male America under 35, is, hey, they're just like us on the group chat.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, you instantly go to what would happen if we accidentally got a media request for The American Mind and we invited, I don't know, some PBS reporter into our group chat. That these are things that we could because we totally most of the time we're talking about
talking points memo editor.
That's right. Yeah. Everyone would see the hideous flavor of Ghost that I'm currently drinking. That's basically the most compromising information I've shared on the group chat.
In a way, it's funny though, because if this were Britain, they easily could have just quashed this from coming out. They have the Official Secrets Act, right? So they could have told the reporter, you're told the newspaper, you're not publishing that. They do that all the time. I mean, it's just kind of a measure of how free our country really is. that this happened and it was reported on. And if he wanted to release all of the information, doesn't matter what it was, he could have done it.
And compare that to the Biden laptop, right? It's like, okay, so we have compromising info on the Trump administration. It's instantly in the pages of The Atlantic. You have compromising info on Hunter Biden's laptop, and you literally can't send it in the DMs.
Well, yeah.
Like, there is also a double standard going on. But yeah, like, functionally speaking, this is kind of an amazing thing about America and journalism, that you just tweet this stuff out.
Yeah, and I'm stealing this point from my wife. Full credit, honey. She was reading a bunch of coverage about it, and she said, well, the good news is that most of the coverage on the substance of the discussion it's kind of praising them, at least by implication, by saying it was a substantive policy debate. And so, I mean, I guess it could have been a lot of worse. Not that we would expect such a thing, but, in the fever dreams of the left, they expect to see a bunch of Hitler memes or something on the group chat. But so, no, I think that helped the story as well. It was serious men talking about a serious policy issue pretty cordially, and I guess you could say a mild dissent from J.D. Vance, urging caution and maybe to wait and see, and not wanting to bail out the Europeans by reopening trade through the Red Sea. But yeah, it's all very interesting. The related topic, well, I'll just mention it now because we just talked about Hunter Biden's laptop, but I would recommend everyone go check out Molly Hemingway's Twitter feed. She has a video of her testimony in front of Congress. Was it today, Mike, or was it yesterday? I forget.
I think it was yesterday.
Yeah, yesterday, where she's just talking about this whole censorship apparatus that was mobilized to quash before it ever got out, the laptop story. And then also to go after publications like hers at the Federalist because they have been critical of Black Lives Matter, among other things. And she mentions NewsGuard and the UK-based Center for Countering Digital Hate and this whole NGO government alliance to censor the free flow of information. It's just good to be reminded about how that was just not that long ago, and to be thankful for the world in which we live now, where we've been delivered from a lot of this stuff, and will continue to, I hope, put an axe to most of it.
Yeah, and she was, typically Molly fashion. I mean, calling out the Democrats sitting on that committee right before her, saying, you did this, you participated in this, and saying, look, there's more things that you're doing even right now. Like the censorship complex is breaking apart, thank God, but there's more to do. I just saw, actually, Ryan T. Anderson, I think he was a Publius alum with the Claremont Institute. His book actually now just got taken back off of Amazon. Just saw that about an hour ago.
Off again?
Yep. Yeah, they removed it again. So it's going, and we definitely need to be vigilant.
Yeah. Yeah, Ryan's book, most of our listeners probably know about it. When Harry became Sally, about the transgender movement, it was off of Amazon for 2 years, and then a few weeks ago got put back on Amazon, but I guess now is booted off once again. It should be our plug for everyone buying physical copies of books rather than Kindle or anything else, because at some point in the future, I hope this doesn't come to pass, but it could be the case that good old-fashioned physical libraries will be one of the readouts of civilization in light of AI and censorship and all the rest.
Yes, you need to be paper-pilled and you need to be memorizing poetry. These are both urgent civilizational skills at the present moment. Ryan, are we going to have Amelia on the podcast? I feel like she's a functional fifth host at this point. She's delivered a point ventriloquized by you, and didn't she pick one of our topics last time too?
Oh yeah, I'm often getting topic ideas from Amelia. Maybe we'll have to have her on.
Definitely.
Albert will want to make his case that he keeps telling me he wants me to buy him a suit so that he can meet President Trump, and I said I'm working on it.
Incredibly based. I love the why. I actually didn't know that. You told us he was asking for a suit, which is in itself makes him a rather unusual. What is he, 4 now? But
he's 6. Yeah.
6. Oh, okay. But still, I was not asking for a suit at the age of 6. I was chafing at the fact that I had to wear shoes to gym class.
Yeah.
And also, it's because he wants to meet the president. So I think we should nominate him for a Medal of Honor. Or what are the National Arts Awards? I feel like Trump's probably willing to give those out. If you submit some finger painting.
Well, the Claremont Institute in 2019 got the National Humanities Medal. That's why Albert knows that I've met the president, because there's a picture of me getting the medal. So he's jealous. He thinks anyone can do it.
And he's not wrong. Point of fact.
Yeah, I would have preferred Albert's poetry to what's her name at
Amanda Gorman.
Girl.
Oh no!
Yes, Amanda Gorman. Don't be memorizing that poetry.
No.
Yeah, go memorize something good. Philip Larkin or Keats or something.
Yeah. Speaking of a sort of related area of censorship, Jay Bhattacharya was just confirmed to be the director of the National Institutes for Health, replacing Francis Collins. And thank God for that. Bhattacharya, of course, and a couple of his colleagues or co-conspirators, the left would have you know, were responsible for the Great Barrington Declaration, which I think it was in maybe fall of 2020. I'm not sure. Basically said that lockdowns were a bad idea. The best approach for this respiratory virus, everyone's going to get it eventually. What we really need to do is isolate the very vulnerable and then let it rip, was one of the epithets thrown at that, what was pitched at the time by Francis Collins and others. We've come to know from internal emails. Collins said, we need to kill this now. And the talking points went out and everyone was saying, well, they're an extreme wing of epidemiology. This is a fringe theory that we should all get herd immunity by getting the virus, and that will help get us back to normal. When it turns out in hindsight, what would have been the best plan, both economically and as a matter of public health. So it's good to see Bhattacharya getting some redemption. Although I should add that unfortunately, just given the times we're in, he got confirmed on a party line vote. So you would think that a cool-headed expert on such things, who turns out to mostly have been right, probably, and non-hysterical and science-driven, you would hope he'd at least get one Democratic vote, but I guess not.
Well, Bhattacharya is characteristically kind of an unsung hero, and I should, in full disclosure, say I count him a friend, and so I have a lot of admiration for him as an individual. But also, Ryan, as you indicate, he said, sort of like Ryan Anderson, really, on the trans issue, he was saying the most uncomfortable things when they were the most vilified. It was not like this, people were starting to come around on COVID and he was getting kind of on the movement. It was that he led the pack in saying what very few other people, besides those of us on this podcast, were willing to say. And he was saying it with the full weight of his authority as a doctor and as a scholar of epidemiology. And he was 100% right on the major points. And he was hounded. He was vilified. I mean, with this kind of quiet grace. So this is entirely to the good. I also think, and this is sort of a separate point, I'm interested to know what you guys think of this, that it comes at a moment when, have you noticed that the New York Times is like quietly conducting a reappraisal of the COVID years, but doing it without any sense of accountability whatsoever? There are like 4 essays that have recently come out by different people in the Times to the effect that, wow, COVID really rearranged our system and broke our politics. Wow, we were so badly misled on this issue. Geez, it does seem like this was terribly mishandled. Mistakes sure were made. I mean, we can link to these. I'm not exaggerating about them. And we were hearing it in podcasts and all this stuff. It's really funny because the right, I feel like, has kind of largely moved on from COVID. Nobody really wants to litigate it anymore. But the Times is sort of, I don't know why exactly they've chosen this moment. I guess because nobody's paying that much attention, but it would seem that quietly the history is going to be rewritten about this. And it would be perhaps worth our while to hold people's feet to the fire. I mean, there were those Atlantic articles like, we need a COVID amnesty. And at the time, everybody was like, absolutely not. But I feel like the Times is like slyly going for a COVID amnesty. And it seems like a moment in which guys like Bhattacharya could be rehabilitated, but nobody will ever, ever, ever say you were right or would ever apologize to him. Like, this is a very weird thing that I'm not sure if they'll get away with it.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like a movie, turnaround. I mean, from being vilified, being targeted by, Francis Collins, head of NIH, and I'm sure, I would guess that probably came from even higher than that, would be my guess, is what happens usually with all those kinds of things. But, now it's like, I think he talked about in his statement, Bhattacharya, about science is about free speech, scientific dissent is okay. And in fact, it's the very essence of science. He's going to foster a culture of leadership at the NIH to encourage different perspectives, like, exactly what science is, not capital S science, where, hey, this is what we believe, let's burn dissenters. I mean, that's not science. That's just pure ideology masquerading. So that's good that science, is actually going to be returning to the NIH. And I just want to say, a little bit too about the guy who's going to be replacing Francis Collins. I mean, this is a guy who was appointed by Obama, kind of public evangelical Christian, and just what a black mark that was for elite evangelicals. This guy funding all kinds of experiments with stem cells, aborted baby body parts, etc. So, I mean, that whole thing is gone, thank God. And so, I mean, it's just, you look at Collins, what he did there, what a disaster. And Bhattacharya has a lot of opportunities to do some real good now and really turn the NIH in a really good and positive direction.
Yeah, I wish all the best about Acharya. It would be interesting to see what kind of house cleaning he does at NIH in light of all this. I think you're right, Spencer. And maybe the reason they're doing it is because they're religious institutions, that is Princeton, Harvard, et cetera, have started to look at this. So the New York Times, I think it was the daily morning thing they do. They had a couple of these Princeton social scientists on saying, and who I think were mostly not being disingenuous, had kind of arrived at this conclusion honestly, and we're certainly not, as far as I could tell, cheerleaders for censoring COVID misinformation, quote unquote, back at the time. But they looked at all the data and they said, really, the only thing that made any difference is the mortality rates for the overall, but really for the elderly, were lower in states that had higher vaccine uptake. But the lockdowns, the school closures, the masking really had no effect on mortality anywhere. So we shut the whole country down for the better part of a year and a half for no reason, with no effect.
Well, COVID is kind of the ultimate plane flies into World Trade Center. It's the ultimate inanimate object that is supposed to have done all of the terrible things that actual bad people did. So you hear all of these articles about like COVID shut down the schools, like COVID really messed up with our economy. We really, due to COVID, we couldn't do this or that. It's really easy to forget that all of that is complete trash. Like the reaction to COVID, the mismanagement of COVID, the misinformation around COVID, the political partisanship that immediately attached to COVID, like that stuff caused irreparable damage to many parts of our social fabric. But COVID didn't do that. Like COVID was a terrible event that happened to which all these people responded in this really grotesque way. And yeah, Ryan, I do think that it's partly because the principled scientists, of whom there still are many who actually look at data, are finding it impossible not to say that none of this stuff worked. And some of those people are blessed, anointed by the institutions that people on the Times will accept as real. But what they'll never do is reevaluate their assessment of whether the people who were saying that earlier might also kind of merit some attention. And it does, I mean, it aggravates this whole thing that Mike mentioned that we've been talking about forever, which is like this notion of science as a sort of oracular ultimatum that is just like synonymous with politics. Like whoever has political power is therefore by necessity, or whoever's politically correct is therefore by necessity also like on the side of science, whatever people happen to be saying. And it's kind of analogous to like, Jonathan Haidt now has this book out, The Anxious Generation, which is really good. And Haidt's a good guy who's doing good work. But it's basically like we're now putting the imprimatur of data onto this thing that everybody has known for a long time, which is that the internet is bad for young developing brains. And I guess if you need that imprimatur, this is a really like helpful piece of information. But what the Times needs is like the political permission and the appropriate distance from any accountability in order to admit that like actually this was terrible. But it's all being done with this like weird sleight of hand where it was COVID. Somehow COVID did these things, even though what's actually coming out is that COVID was so terribly mismanaged that these things happened.
Well, it's kind of the way that the lab leak hypothesis, which for the longest time was just considered the most outlandish, conspiratorial, racist idea, has passed into received wisdom that everybody acknowledges that that's the way it is. And the CIA, I guess, came out and said, yeah, it came from the lab. I mean, it was the obvious thing. Like some places noted this very early. Was it in Esquire magazine? Had an article like right at the very beginning of the whole thing. And Nicholson Baker. I mean, even like Jon Stewart was saying, oh, does this make sense that that virus just happened to show up right next door to that virus institute and there's no connection? And everyone was like, well, come on now. It is kind of, it is this sort of Orwellian mirror world where everybody is kind of just brushing over or forgetting the fact that until last week, this was considered like a really horrible thing to say. And now it's like, oh, okay, yeah, it's true, actually. I mean, wouldn't they like block you on social media if you talked about the lab leak? I mean,
this is the major locus of all the stuff which is now emerging about Biden's pressure on Facebook.
Yeah.
It's all about this stuff. It was all about the lab leak and COVID vaccines. And if you said the wrong thing, you would be downgraded or just kicked off. And I think a lot of this stuff, I'm still kind of getting a handle on the reporting and trying to see some good pieces about it. But I think a lot of this stuff basically comes out of Germany. Like these are sort of German and EU laws about speech related to what you were saying in the previous segment, Seth, that European countries just don't even think of this stuff the way we do. It's
right.
not like they're starting from a baseline of anybody can say anything and then chipping away at those freedoms. They're starting from a baseline basically of like the divine right of kings mandates that you say only what is within the acceptable range of opinions. And then maybe we'll open up a little daylight in the wake of the Enlightenment for you to like say some more things. And we always have to pay lip service to the idea that we believe in free speech because America has now sort of redefined that as the North Star of, or sort of the gold standard of liberal democracy. But it's not natural to European polities at all to think this way. And Germany under Merkel, and I think also subsequent to her, has like not treated the internet in this way at all. And they've had several laws that really impose like sort of severe restrictions. And so then this all results in like Facebook and Twitter and so forth, if they want to do business internationally, and these are global companies, they sort of have to find some way of appeasing these totally foreign standards of speech. And that's why you get notifications sometimes on Twitter that's like, we are obliged to inform you that your tweet violates German hate speech laws. Like, this is something that you will often read. Like, Dave Rubin is always like violating German hate speech laws. And they're like, well, we haven't taken it down, but we just want you to know that this was flagged. And I think a lot of this is like there are pressures on these giant global companies that don't have anything to do with our regime form or our priorities or our ideas about speech as Americans, and aren't even entirely the consequence of like Klaus Schwab sitting up in the mountains and rubbing his hands from the Fortress of Solitude. Although that's certainly not helping, but it's like, as our old friend James Poulos used to say, if you want to run the internet like we run America, you actually sort of have to assert that. And instead, we, at the time of COVID, were ruled by people that basically agree with the German perspective on this and actually want inclusion in the Aspen Ideas Summit version of or rather the, WEF version of how this all should work. And so, yeah, under Biden, I think like Zuckerberg has now said he was being constantly hammered to take stuff down about what is now totally basic accepted fact about COVID, like this lab leak hypothesis. There's a great book about this, by the way, called Viral, about kind of how aggressively that whole thing was silenced. And some of the major medical journals like The Lancet were sort of involved in this and totally squandered their credibility. And yeah, it's like they just wielded this massive sort of supranational state power like a cudgel in the name of something that they are now admitting is like totally untrue and just completely made up.
Well, the weird thing is like, why?
Right.
Like, why did they care? Why was that such an important point? That like this had to be suppressed. That it came from this lab. I mean, except for the fact that like Fauci and we were, funding the lab, and maybe we said, go ahead and leak that now. We could use that. I mean, that's kind of like what I've always sort of had in the back of my mind regarding like the DNC's like nuclear option. Let's start a worldwide pandemic and blame it on Trump. But if you look back, it's like, well, why was this such an important thing to like worry about for them?
Well, right. I mean, I guess this is one thing that sets the vaccine issue apart from the lab leak issue. There's sort of two different and I was sort of conflating them earlier. The vaccine thing, they had all of these ideas about who needed to get vaccinated and why. The vaccine's not working because not enough people have it, which seems not to have been true. It seems like there were like actual problems with the vaccine. But they had this theory of the case that also then dovetailed with their more general philosophy that people aren't smart enough or grown up enough to make their own decisions. And so they have to be like nudged and kind of misled. And Fauci was telling the Times, like, oh, yeah, once I realized that I could get people to take the vaccine, I thought I'll nudge the threshold up a little bit and tell them that we actually need to be at 85% instead of 65% or whatever. So they totally felt themselves entitled to rewrite their so-called absolute objective standards and even to mislead or to suppress information when they thought they were virtuous, when they were in the right about what their objectives and goals were. Why it was included in that we should not believe the origins of this thing were from a lab, I can only sort of surmise that, Seth, you're right. It's like, well, it's because it implicated the wrong people, right? It was like, it looked bad for Fauci, who had been involved in gain of function research, to now sort of be the person who was supposed to be in charge of tamping down the unintended negative consequences of gain of function research. And all of that was just like much too embarrassing and suggested a degree of fallibility on the part of our supposed clerics and betters that they were just unwilling to accept. And so what do censorious monarchs do when their censorious monarchy is starting to like let out embarrassing facts? Like, they double down on their monarchic censorship. That's sort of the only tool in their toolkit.
And this is kind of like what we haven't like dealt with. Like, you know, people are like, oh, okay, yeah, it came from a lab. Well, who paid for the lab? Like, who was doing, you know, I mean, this remains to be grappled with.
Right.
Yeah.
And nobody like, this is what the Times, maybe this is the answer to the question of like, why now? Why the Times? Is like, they think this is their window to sort of plausibly acknowledge the reversal of general opinion about this, and to kind of like say with plausible deniability that they've gotten it out in the open. Yes, there were all sorts of mistakes made in COVID, and then they hope we'll all just move on without asking like some of these other questions, which would be diabolically clever and might actually work. It's so funny, like when we get into this stuff and we really put on our tinfoil hats, because like there's a guy at my gym that's always telling me, like, he sort of knows that I do stuff in news media, and he's like, always like, they're not telling you the whole story, and like there's like all this stuff, and the things that he then says are kind of, to me, cuckoo bananas, but like, he's not wrong, right? And so you get into some of this stuff like, who's paying for this and what's the back, and you sound a little bit crazy, but also these are the sort of questions that, like, if we had an actual reportorial class in America that were still interested in their role as the genuine fourth estate, they wouldn't be like telling tales out of school from the GC. They wouldn't be like gossiping about how they got led into, I mean, that's a minor story, but like, somebody could write this story and genuinely win a Pulitzer in a sane world.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, that's why, you know, conspiracy theories are just so prevalent. It's like, look, when everything gets shut down, especially, I mean, look at the New York Post in 2020, look at what big tech did. All those conspiracy theories are just going to bubble up. But it's people knowing that they're being lied to nonstop. They're trying to search for answers. You know, they jump into subjects they don't know anything about. And this is just what happens. But what do? You don't shut it down. You actually meet them where they're at and educate them, talk with them. Like, actually, just try not shutting it down and calling them idiots. That just seems to be insanely impossible for elites in America and elsewhere to do. So this is then what happens. You have a proliferation of stuff that, you know, may be true, maybe have some truth in it, maybe not, but people just know they're being lied to constantly, and so they're going to look elsewhere.
On Severance, my favorite show, which is about everything and always is right to refer to, there is a moment, Mike, I think you just watched this episode, and this is not a spoiler, but there's a moment where one of the like outside, they're called outies and innies. There's the like, you split into two people, and one of them never remembers work, so they live outside of the office, and one of them only remembers work, so they're trapped within the office forever. And there's a moment where, using basically recorded messages, one Audi guy gets to converse with his innie, and you suddenly realize that even though he's generally kind of a good guy, he still thinks that he can manipulate and talk to this part of himself like a gullible child. And he has this really rude realization that actually this is a person who's literally just as smart as he is, because he's actually made out of the same brain matter and physical stuff as himself. And it does sort of feel like that's the condition of these would-be like Habsburgian monarchs like Fauci, who think they can nudge the people around. It's like they're constantly discovering that actually makes people really indignant and is deeply offensive and is in no way as subtle or as difficult to discern as they flatter themselves that it is. And so then, yeah, they cannot stop just trying to run rings around people because they think they're so smart. They think they are the 105 IQ person's idea of a 130 IQ person or whatever the meme is.
Yeah, and I just keep going back to Lincoln. Like, how do you do it? You have a drop of honey. I mean, that you actually have friendship. You actually try to form civic friendship. That's the only way that we're really going to be able to solve, I think, like the master kind of issue at the center of this. But these people it would take them to look at themselves, look at their pride, and actually deal with that and repent of that. And that is just absolutely not going to happen. So that's
yes, because what was the signal and really astounding feature of Lincoln's whole demeanor? It was that he thought of himself as a man among men. He thought of himself as fundamentally, at a philosophical level, equal to the citizens of the United States. He talked about this constantly, and this is one major reason why he felt he couldn't trample on states' rights, or he couldn't intervene in ways that the Congress had not approved. There were all sorts of barriers to his action, I guess is what he's saying, because he genuinely thought that people got to know the information and make the choices, even if he didn't like them. And that wasn't, I mean, Lincoln was remarkable in this respect. And that's like, the guys that we're talking about are so many miles away from that it's like it's another planet.
Yeah, he compared a drop of honey, right, Mike, to a gallon of gall. All we're getting these days from our rulers is gallons of gall.
An ancient metaphor. The honeyed cup comes from Lucretius. We get it in Cicero. That when you want to teach and instruct, you're basically administering medicine. But if you're administering medicine to boys, you put honey around the rim of the cup. I don't know if Lincoln knew that, but he must have somehow ingested it.
I'm sure that's where he got it from. Yeah.
Yeah.
And a man whose favorite ancient book was Euclid Elements. So yeah, definitely was despite not being raised in a government school and educated by master degree holding education folks, he read the Bible, Shakespeare, some Euclid. It takes you a long way, it turns out.
Sure does. This is why you memorize poetry.
I just wanted to bring up this other tinfoil hat conspiracy theory thing that's emerged in the last few days, which is this lawsuit that a bunch of, well, I guess hostages, like Israeli hostages or the families or ex-hostages, have filed this lawsuit against a bunch of the people who were involved in the Columbia demonstrations, like Nurdin Kizwani, who's a head of Within Our Lifetime, and Mahmoud Khalil, that guy who was, they're trying to deport. And they're claiming that, and a couple of other ones, they're saying that they're suing them, that they were involved, for their support of Hamas and so forth. But which seems a little tendentious, but they point out that Students for Justice in Palestine, Columbia, on October 6th, 2023, like their Instagram account, which had been completely quiet for 6 months or something, all of a sudden posted, like 3 minutes before the attack, they posted, "We're back." And like all of this like lurid kind of propaganda and stuff. And so, basically they're saying that it's not just that these people are after the fact supporting Hamas, but that they actually knew something was happening, that they had foreknowledge.
You were in collusion, or not collusion, but in communication with.
In communication. And like, if you think about it, it kind of makes sense because, all right, if you have like 3,000 or 4,000 soldiers, like Hamas people, militants storming into Israel, well, then you've got to figure there were like, I don't know, 15 or 20,000 people in support. roles back in Gaza, and they all have friends and family. So just even speaking conservatively,
maybe they just got added to the group chat by accident.
oh yeah, sure. Well, no, but like,
wait.
You got to figure there were like 50,000 people in Gaza who knew something about it, and these folks here in New York, they're complete. I mean, they all have friends in Gaza, and even if they don't know Hamas people specifically, they know people who know them. So it kind of makes sense. Like, how could they not have heard something?
And wait, wasn't Mahmoud Khalil at Columbia? Not for nothing, but the guy that, yeah. So like,
yeah, he was like in charge of one of their groups, Columbia University Against Apartheid or whatever it is. Yeah. So I mean, it's an interesting wrinkle anyway. I mean, I don't know if it's true or not, but it's a little weird that. And then the response was totally coordinated. I mean, look, even if I were super anti-Israel, my first reaction when all of it happened on October 7th wouldn't have been like, okay, let's embrace what just happened. And let's leapfrog like the expected response, which is like, this is horrible, and say, no, this was completely, not only was it justified, but it was like moral. And like, let's all turn out and have huge rallies on October 8th, celebrating what happened and denouncing the coming genocide. I mean, it was just all so like, it's clearly coordinated like nationwide because they all had the same messages. They all had the same brochureware and the same like graphics. So it's just weird.
I mean, yeah, the other explanation for that part of it, I guess, would be that they didn't know when an attack was coming, but they had talked about what they would do when it came at some point, right? Everybody in these circles sort of knew that Hamas wasn't going to just stay dormant forever. And so there was going to be some big moment, and they had like kind of operational plans in place the way that I think Antifa tends to sort of share like
I guess
for this stuff. But yeah. It doesn't explain why they were active suddenly the day before.
Yeah,
that part
right.
is like very suspicious.
So I thought that was interesting.
It certainly highlights one thing about the Khalil case for me, which is the Trump administration, as we discussed, sort of went in a little bit half-cocked to that to that whole thing. But they also kept saying, basically, like, we know this guy's a bad guy. And one thing that we never really, even we don't tend to consider is like, there probably is sort of secret information that they can't divulge that they do have. They probably didn't just pick this guy out of a hat. So there's probably stuff that, whether or not this lawsuit turns out to be successful, there's probably a lot of stuff that the government knows and is currently looking into that we are not privy to, that makes this all like makes a certain degree of more sense than it does from the hostile perspective of the press.
What's cracking me up about this is that the Democrats are really throwing in on this topic. They're like, no, we're standing like four square behind these people. But again, like, why? What's the rationale? They're just like, well, due process, because you're violating due process. No, okay, that's fine. But due process is never the ultimate value, right? I mean, is it? I mean, they don't really care about due process in any other circumstance.
No, it's like, it's sort of if only Mahmoud Khalil had a rippling abs photo hiking in nature like Luigi Mangione, then they would really be in with a folk hero. But yeah, it's like sort of weird. You want to process so that you can ensure the appropriate carriage of justice, which in many cases would include like the deportation of violent, illegal alien criminal. Like this sort of like, but if that happened, that would not represent true due process in the eyes of the left in some way.
It's not who we are, Spencer. It's not who.
That's right. That's right. Due process is like getting the right result in some. It's like not doing anything bad to the nice people.
I had forgotten the one hilarious detail about Signalgate, which I just have to bring up. I don't know if you guys knew. I only found this out because I heard it on the commentary podcast. I think today's. But did you know that Mike Waltz's brother-in-law is the lead singer of Creed?
Really?
What?
Yes. Yeah, I saw that.
Because his sister is a former Miss New Jersey, and she married the lead singer of Creed. That's pretty good.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, okay. Well, I knew there was something I didn't like about that guy.
Yeah. I was gonna make some nice transition quip from our NIH thing to the price of eggs because of bird flu, but did want to just mention the wholesale price of eggs has plummeted 59% in a month. We were trading bad puns before this podcast about how Trump really wasn't responsible for rising egg prices. There were bird flu and the murder of millions of chickens was to stem the spread of bird flu, and I guess we've recovered now. And the left maybe having put too many eggs in that basket. Sorry, blaming all this on Trump now has to sit quietly while egg prices plummet, and we should hope inflation in general starts to head south. But
That's not even a new bad pun, Ryan. That's
no,
just the
it's
same
repeated.
one that we already groaned at. But yeah, it's
Well, it
sort of
wasn't in the
funny.
recording though, Spencer. So we groaned
That's true.
privately. Yeah.
We can't prevail upon Ryan G to start recording outtakes before we do the main show. So all our best material gets left on the cutting room floor. All the secret group chat, OPSEC stuff is remains hidden. But yeah, this is a funny issue because on the one hand, the price of eggs was never Trump's fault. This is all totally irrelevant to the economy more generally. This was a bird flu. There was like a bird flu outbreak and it caused egg prices to spike. And then there was this perhaps astroturfed, but definitely real movement to like turn the entire Trump presidency into having been about the price of eggs. Like there was this TikTok meme that the people who voted for Trump just wanted cheaper eggs. And so they didn't care that they were hurling America into a pit of fascism. They didn't care that they were handing over the keys to government to this proto-Hitlerian authoritarian, worse than Hitler, right? And so it's like, oh, but you just wanted cheaper eggs, which was also never a thing, also completely made up. And so there was this sort of double imaginary fantasy that we had voted for Trump for cheaper eggs. Then we really got ours because Trump made eggs more expensive. So neither parts of that was true. And now eggs are cheaper. Also, I think not really Trump's doing. I think they just they fixed the bird flu. I don't really know. I'm not a big bird flu like expert, so I can't tell you exactly what happened, but it seems like it's over. So now does that redound to Trump's credit? I mean, we never asked for that, but I guess why not? Like, I guess we got the cheaper eggs that I guess we voted for, even though none of those things ever happened. I do think more generally that the Trump economy is going to be better than people have been making it out to be. I've voiced my concerns about the tariff stuff, and I do have them. And I'm also not an economist. So I'm really this is a podcast where we talk about things I know nothing about. But like, it just seems like actually some of this stuff is going to come out in the wash and we're probably going to be more stable economically than people have thought. So this may be part of that, even though it's sort of peripheral. I don't know.
One can hope.
One sure can. Yeah, exactly. I heard a guy saying it on Morning Wire who seemed to know things about the economy. And so being an idiot who just listens to podcasts all day, I thought, well, there's a data point.
I voted for fascism and all I got was this lousy, cheap dozen eggs.
Although, you got to slonk a good egg. I mean, this should be a major MAHA platform, actually.
Mm-hmm.
The egg slonking. But I haven't actually checked at my local Publix yet whether eggs have gone back down or not. We did, right before we recorded last time, the Fed held interest rates steady, and Jerome Powell has generally seemed less freaked out than Trump's critics about all of this turbulence.
They held interest rates steady, and he insinuated that the tariff stuff is going to be bad for everybody. So you got a little bit of a dig in. But well, anyone have any recommendations? I have one that I've mentioned before, but I want to mention it again. I apologize that it's so expensive, but it really holds up well. Everyone should go buy The Politics of Budget Control, Congress, the Presidency, and the Growth of the Administrative State by John Marini. Only Marini could tell you about how the budget process starting in the 70s became all about the administrative state, while also footnoting Hegel and Tocqueville and giving you a nice tour of the transformation of American government from the philosophical roots on up. So go check it out.
It's sort of ironic that the politics of budget control will be bad for your personal budget control if you buy it, but
Yes,
you
it
still
is.
should. I have a book recommendation in keeping with my general role of just throwing random cultural objects at our listeners that are not
Yeah.
directly political. Short book called Winters in the World. Just a model of accessible scholarship, trade paperback, the kind of thing they do in the UK really well, and we don't do as well here. If you walk into a bookstore in the UK, there'll usually just be a table of some series of Oxford Dons telling you about interesting things. And this is on a subject that I personally love, which is Old English, the deep roots of our language. And it's organized into 12 chapters. Each chapter is 1 month, and then there are 4 sections. Each section is a season, and it's about how Old English language describes the seasons poetically and how that links up with the liturgical calendar, and how some of this stuff is kind of still present in our language today. I'll share one to whet your appetite. My favorite part of it comes in this very month, March. So Old English poets liked to describe winter as an invading army or an invading general who would chain up the earth in frost, and the buds and the flowers would be locked away in this hard casing of frost. And then March, which is the month named for the god of war, Mars or Ares, comes in like a sort of conquering liberator. And that's why everything is so chaotic, because there's floods, but there's also sunshine, and he's breaking the boundaries, or he's breaking the chains of frost that winter has held the world in. So it's stuff like that. And I found it very beautiful and really readable and fun if you are looking for something to distract you from wall-to-wall politics.
So I have one related to Wolf Hall. So last week that I talked about, Thomas Cranmer, the Archbishop, it was his martyr day, I think just a few days ago. So it was burned at the stake along with Ridley, Latimer, under Queen Mary. And there's a great book. Philip Edgecombe Hughes wrote The Theology of the English Reformers. It's much cheaper than The Politics of Budget Control, which is great. But it just gives you it's just primary sources of these gentlemen, what they wrote, their theology, what their lives were like, autobiographical, but really, really good and really insightful for that period.
Excellent.
Awesome. We're very English today. A lot of Anglosphere recommendations.
All right. Well, thank you all once again for listening to the Roundtable. If you want to learn more about our work, go to claremont.org. If you want to support our work, go to claremont.org/donate. Please rate the show well, spread the love, share it with your friends. And you can see all of our work, as always, at also our 2 publications, AmericanMind.org and ClaremontReviewBooks.com. New issue is out. It should be in your mailbox. If you aren't a subscriber, you should be. Editor's note on comparing Elon Musk to Mount Vesuvius. A wonderful analogy from Charles Kessler. A great essay by Bill Vogeley on where the Democrats are now and where they go from here. And we're beginning early work actually on a 25th anniversary double issue, which will be in the fall. We have a couple issues coming up first, spring and summer, but keep an eye out for that. We've got some good stuff we're lining up. And also always see what we're up to in DC and around the States, trying to wage the war against wokeness and everything, identity politics and general madness in DC at dc.claremont.org. Thank you all for listening, and we will talk to you next week.